Hello. Today I'll be discussing the inaccuracies of Lin-Manuel Miranda's famous musical Hamilton, an American musical. Although some may perceive it as an entertaining way to learn about history, it cannot be relied on due to multiple components. This video will break down how the musical reshapes history and how it should not be considered historically accurate. To begin, one of the biggest aspects of any musical is the cast. Hamilton is notorious for having a racially diverse cast portraying a time that was primarily white. The cast creates an inclusive feeling for everyone who watches the musical. The inclusivity is a positive aspect, but like Anne Melissa Potter says in her article, 1776, and Hamilton, comparing founding histories in musical theater, a fictional past is displayed, giving people the wrong idea of how desegregated the past truly was. The casting of Hamilton is known by the term color-conscious casting. This is when actors of certain races are cast in order to bring diversity and inclusivity to the show. Hamilton has not been the only show that has done this. The famous Netflix show Bridgerton has also done this, with their show that takes place in the 1800s. The show revolves around the prestigious Bridgerton family's children finding love during the Regency era in England. Another prominent time where diversity was lacking. Kusam Ghulam Hussain discusses how the diverse casting blurs the lines between fiction and historical accuracy. One of the areas that is prominent in the discussion of slavery is in the musical. Ghulam Hussain explains how having a racially diverse cast tell the stories of founding fathers, white slave owners, adds another depth of contemplation to the way you remember American history. The musical hardly mentions the idea of slavery, which is a huge portion of that time period. The representation of the historical figures in the musical can lead to the misinterpretation of founding fathers, their goals, and their values. Annette Gordon-Reed brings up the point of how Alexander Hamilton is portrayed as a proud immigrant in the musical. In actuality, Alexander Hamilton was against the open immigration policies. In addition to this, they also neglect slavery in the musical. In the Harvard Gazette, written by Liz Mineo, Gordon-Reed explains how Hamilton bought and sold slaves. In the musical, they bring up slavery in one single song, this being in Yorktown, the world turns upside down.
So the American experiment begins with my friends all scattered to the winds. Lawrence is in South Carolina, redefining bravery. We'll never be free until we end slavery. When we finally drop.
The lyrics that you just listened to very briefly mention slavery at the very end. It is quickly sung by the ensemble and then moved on from. Although slavery is only brought up once in the musical, it was a huge portion of that time period and in American history. One big portion that slaves contributed to was fighting in the war. Cassandra Murphy discusses how black soldiers were about 1/4 of the men fighting in Yorktown, that being the same Battle of Yorktown from the song that was just sung. The removal of slaves from the musical is essentially erasing a big part of American history, thus going back to that idea of a false history. The removal of slavery and dismission of the founding fathers' beliefs is what creates this false utopia that Anne Melissa Potter talks about in her article. Although it would be nice to believe our world and history is perfect, it's not. There's a long list of imperfections and wrongdoings humanity has done. Erasing those wrongdoings from our history will not make amends for them, but instead make people forget about them. Forgetting the struggles people went through is the last thing that should be taking place. If we forget these struggles, then we can never learn from them. Hamilton could have given children opportunities to learn about slavery and be a more accurate representation of history from them to learn from. Instead, it goes for more of the dramatics of history. William D. Adler tried explaining how it could have helped students learn about federalism and other aspects of history. The issue is that so much of the history that took place was altered. It would lead children to start confusing facts with fiction. Mary Jo Lodge in Shannon Sigafoo's article brings up a good point. Lodge explains, there's a lot to love about Hamilton, but there's also a lot of things to critique in it. In my opinion, I think the musical could be of good use to get kids engaged with history, but it should not be the only thing relied on. Teachers could possibly only show the most accurate parts of the musical, or critique it where the imperfections are. In conclusion, Hamilton, an American musical, is an exceptional musical, but it does lack in historical accuracy. The diverse casting, dismissal of slavery, and altering of founding fathers' views creates a nice drama-filled story, but an unreliable one. Unfortunately, I believe Hamilton, an American musical, could have been written differently in order to be more accurate, but still keep that entertaining aspect. At the end of the day, we can appreciate the creativity of the musical, but we should not confuse fact with fiction.